Picture this for a moment. You are standing in a store, looking at something you do not even really want, and your hand is already reaching for your wallet. You are not broke. You are not reckless. You are actually someone who reads about personal finance, who knows what compound interest means, who probably has a savings account with at least something sitting in it. And yet, the money keeps disappearing, not all at once, not dramatically, but in that quiet, steady way that leaves you checking your bank account on a Tuesday afternoon thinking, where did it all go? Here's the part no one tells you. The problem is almost never the big purchases. You've heard the advice. Stop buying lattes, cancel subscriptions, don't eat out so much. And you've probably tried some version of that. Maybe it worked for a week. Maybe it made you miserable. Maybe you saved $40 and felt like you had finally cracked the code, right before you spent $300 on something you barely remember. Here's what's actually happening to your money, and it's not what you think. The habits that are slowly draining your financial life are not the exciting ones. They're not the vacations, they're not the big nights out, they're not the one purchase you feel guilty about. They're the quiet, invisible, almost embarrassingly ordinary patterns that you have never once thought to question. And the habits that could genuinely change your financial life are not exciting either. They're not the hot stock tips, they're not the passive income side hustles, they're not the seven-figure morning routines. They're boring. They're almost offensively simple. They're the kind of thing you hear and think, yeah, obviously, and then never actually do. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why those boring habits have more financial power than almost every smart money move you've ever read about. And you'll have a clear, specific plan to start implementing them today. The invisible tax of convenience. Let me give you the central idea that makes everything else in this video make sense, because without it, the habits I'm about to share will just feel like a list of annoying things to do. Here's the concept. Every single financial decision you make has a hidden second price tag, and that second price tag is almost always higher than the first one. Think about what that means in practice for your everyday life. When you pay $6 for a pre-made smoothie at the counter, the first price tag is $6. The second price tag, the one that never shows up on the receipt, is that you have just trained yourself to associate smoothie with effortless and immediate, which means the next time you're tired or rushed or slightly stressed, your brain doesn't say, make a smoothie, it says, buy a smoothie. You have quietly made the inconvenient option feel like the wrong option. That's the invisible tax of convenience. It's not just about the money you spend in that single moment. It's about the psychological permission you grant yourself to keep spending that way indefinitely, without ever consciously deciding to. Here's where it gets interesting for you. Researchers at Princeton University found that decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion of making repeated choices throughout the day, significantly lowers your ability to delay gratification by late afternoon. By the time you hit 5 p.m., your brain is already looking for shortcuts, and the most available shortcut in a consumer economy is always the one that costs more money. This is why willpower-based financial advice almost never works long-term for anyone. Telling yourself to just spend less is the equivalent of telling yourself to hold your breath for 6 months. You're not dealing with a discipline problem. You're dealing with a system that's specifically designed to make the expensive option feel like the path of least resistance. What most people never realize is that the unsexy habits I'm about to walk you through are not about discipline at all. They're about quietly redesigning your environment so that the financially sensible option becomes the convenient one. You're not fighting your brain, you're working with it. That's the entire game. And once you understand it that way, the rules become almost obvious. Rule 1. Automate the decision before you feel like spending. Here's the core mechanism at work. every dollar that sits in your checking account has a silent probability of being spent, and that probability increases every single day it remains accessible. This is not a character flaw, it's behavioral economics.
The phenomenon is called present bias, and it describes how your brain systematically overvalues what is available right now versus what is available in the future. A dollar you can spend today feels more real, more urgent, and more yours than a dollar you are theoretically saving for something in 6 months. So here's what actually works. You remove the decision entirely. Set up an automatic transfer, today, not tomorrow, that moves a specific dollar amount out of your checking account and into a separate savings account on the same day your paycheck arrives. Not after you pay bills, not after you see how the month feels, the same day the money lands. The number doesn't have to be dramatic. If you start with $50 per paycheck on a $3,000 monthly income, you are saving $1,200 by the end of the year, and you won't feel it because you never had the chance to develop an emotional attachment to those dollars in the first place. The data on this is striking. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that people who automated savings saved an average of 73% more than those who relied on manual transfers, even when both groups reported similar financial intentions. The intention was identical. The system was not. What happens to you if you skip this rule is not a dramatic collapse. It's something more insidious. You keep telling yourself you will save whatever is left over at the end of the month, and there is never anything left over because human beings naturally expand spending to fill available income. Economists call this lifestyle creep, and it's nearly invisible until you're making twice what you made 5 years ago and somehow still living paycheck to paycheck. This brings us to the next rule, which is about what happens after you save, because saving money in the wrong mental category is almost as costly as not saving it. Rule 2. Name every dollar before it names you. Most people keep their money in 2 categories, money they have and money they owe. That's it. The entire financial architecture of their lives rests on a binary that offers almost no guidance for actual decisions. Here's the principle that changes everything. Money without a job becomes a temptation, and money with a job becomes a commitment. What that means practically is this. Every dollar you own should have a designated purpose before a spending opportunity arises, not in the moment of the decision. When you're standing at a register or scrolling at midnight or talking to someone who just mentioned an amazing trip, you are in the worst possible mental state to make an allocation decision. Your willpower is depleted, your emotions are activated, and your planning brain is half asleep. The unsexy habit is this. Once a month, before the month begins, you open a simple spreadsheet or even a piece of paper, and you write down every dollar you expect to have and exactly where it's going. Rent, groceries, transportation, a specific dining budget, a specific entertainment budget, and then savings. Not vague categories, specific numbers that add up to 0. This is a concept called zero-based budgeting, and it has nothing to do with having no money. It means every dollar has been assigned a role, so that your total allocated spending equals your total income. Here's the number that matters for you. Research from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that households that used some form of written budgeting accumulated an average of $8,000 more in savings over 3 years than comparable households that did not, even when controlling for income level. $8,000, not from earning more, from simply deciding where the money went before the decision was made under pressure. What happens to you without this habit is that your spending gets made by your moods instead of your values. A bad week at work costs you $200 in comfort spending. A good sale costs you $150 in things you weren't planning to buy. You're not in control of your finances, your emotional state is. But here's what makes this rule different for you compared to most budgeting advice. You're not restricting yourself. You're giving yourself explicit permission to spend on things that matter to you. A $150 dining budget is not punishment. It's a decision you made calmly, in advance, that removes guilt and removes temptation simultaneously. Now, once you understand that, the next rule becomes obvious, because naming your dollars only works if you can actually see them. Rule 3. Create a 24-hour waiting room for every unplanned purchase. The mechanics of this rule are simple, and the psychology behind it is profound. Any unplanned purchase above $30, and you should pick your own number based on your income, but $30 is a reasonable starting line, goes into what I call a waiting room. You don't say no, you don't feel deprived. You write it down, you note the date, and you revisit it exactly 24 hours later. Here's why the mechanism works. In behavioral psychology, there's a well-documented pattern called cooling off, where the emotional charge behind an impulsive desire diminishes significantly within a short waiting period. A study from the University of Chicago found that when participants were asked to wait just 24 hours before making unplanned purchases, they followed through on about 30% of those purchases and reported higher satisfaction with the ones they did make. Think about what that math means for you. If you're currently making one unplanned purchase per week, averaging $40, that's roughly $2,000 per year disappearing into things you may not even remember buying. Applying the 24-hour rule means you complete only about 30% of those purchases, saving you approximately $1,400 annually without eliminating a single thing you genuinely wanted.
What happens to you without this rule is not that you are impulsive. It is that you are being marketed to by some of the most sophisticated persuasion systems ever built. Every store layout, every app notification, every limited time offer is specifically engineered to make the 24-hour wait feel impossible. The rule is not about questioning your judgment. It is about giving your judgment the 24 hours it needs to show up. This brings us to a rule that looks even simpler than this one, but has a compounding effect that almost nobody talks about. Rule 4. Cook once, eat twice, save without thinking about it. This rule sounds so mundane that a lot of people skip past it mentally before they fully register what it actually does to a budget over time. Here is the principle. The highest cost food behavior is not restaurants, it is unplanned hunger. When you are hungry and there is nothing immediately available to eat, you will spend whatever is necessary to solve that problem right now, and the amount you spend will be almost entirely determined by what happens to be nearby. The unsexy habit is batch cooking. Once or twice a week, you cook a larger quantity of something simple, something that produces multiple meals at once. A pot of rice and roasted vegetables, a sheet pan of chicken thighs and sweet potatoes, a big batch of soup. You are not meal prepping like a fitness influencer with 6 matching containers. You are just making sure that when future you is tired and hungry and standing in the kitchen at 7 p.m., there is already something there. Here is the number that makes this real for you. The average American spends $166 per month on eating out, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2024 consumer expenditure data. Research from the Harvard School of Public Health found that home-cooked meals cost approximately 60% less per serving than restaurant meals and 40% less than takeout, while producing measurably better nutritional outcomes as a secondary benefit. If you cut your unplanned food spending by just half through batch cooking, not eliminating it, just having it, you are recovering approximately $80 to $100 per month. Over a year, that is more than $1,000, and it required no dramatic sacrifice, just the quiet habit of cooking more than you need a couple of times a week. What happens to you without this rule is that your food budget becomes a direct cash transfer to the emotional labor of decision-making under hunger. And hunger, like decision fatigue, is a condition that systematically lowers your financial defenses. But here is what makes this rule different for you. It is not really about food. It is about the broader principle that preparation is always cheaper than reaction in every category of your financial life. Now, once you understand that, the next rule, which is about the money you spend without ever choosing to spend it, becomes the most important one on this list. Rule 5. Audit your subscriptions every single quarter. The psychology of subscriptions is uniquely dangerous, and it deserves a full explanation before we get to the habit itself. When you pay for something once, a meal, a shirt, a concert ticket, you feel the cost at the moment of purchase, and your brain registers a transaction. When you pay for something via subscription, the payment is engineered to disappear from your conscious awareness as quickly as possible. The charge happens quietly, in the background, on a day you are not thinking about it, and the company's entire pricing model is built around the assumption that you will not cancel even when you stop using the product. This is not speculation, it is the documented business model. Research from C+R Research found that the average American underestimates their monthly subscription spending by approximately $133 per month. That's not $133 total, that's $133 they cannot account for, in addition to whatever subscriptions they believe they are paying for. The real average monthly subscription spend is over $200 for most households. The unsexy habit is this. On the first day of every third month, every quarter, you open your bank statement and your credit card statement, and you go line by line through every recurring charge. For each one, you ask a single question. If this service did not exist and someone offered it to me today at this price, would I pay for it right now? Not, do I sometimes use it? Not, do I think I should use it more? The question is, would I pay for it today knowing exactly how much I use it? Cancel everything where the honest answer is no. What happens to you without this rule is that your monthly expenses silently inflate over time as you accumulate subscriptions and almost never actively remove them, because cancellation requires a conscious decision, and subscriptions are specifically designed to make that decision as friction-filled as possible. Companies put the cancel button at the bottom of a 7-step process for a reason. This brings us to the final category of rules, the ones that are not about habits or systems, but about the way you think about money itself, which is ultimately where everything either comes together or falls apart. Rule 6. Track the number that actually matters. Most people who pay attention to their money are tracking the wrong number, and this single mistake is responsible for more financial confusion and demotivation than almost anything else. Here is the principle. Your income tells you how much you earned, and your expenses tell you how much you spent, but neither of those numbers tells you whether you are getting wealthier or not. The number that actually reflects your financial progress is your net worth, the total of everything you own minus the total of everything you owe. The unsexy habit is calculating your net worth once a month and writing it down in the same place every time. It takes approximately 10 minutes. You add up your savings, your investments, and the equity in any assets you own. You subtract your credit card balances, your loans, and any other liabilities. You write down the resulting number. That's it. Here is why the number matters so much for you psychologically. Most financial goals are abstract: save more, spend less, build wealth. And abstract goals have almost no motivating power because they have no feedback loop. Net worth gives you a concrete number that either went up or went down this month, and it reflects every financial behavior you engaged in over that period. It's a single data point that integrates everything. Research from Northwestern Mutual found that people who tracked their net worth monthly were 2.5 times more likely to feel financially confident and were significantly more likely to maintain consistent saving behavior over a 5-year period, regardless of their income level. The confidence did not come from having more money, it came from knowing where they stood. What happens to you without this habit is your financial progress stays invisible, which means the psychological reward for good behavior never arrives, which means the behavior slowly erodes.
You are trying to navigate without a map, and you keep making the same small wrong turns because you cannot see where they're taking you. Now, once you understand the power of the number, the final rule, which is the deepest one, becomes the foundation for everything. Rule 7. Define what enough looks like before the world defines it for you. Here is the mechanism. In the absence of your own clearly defined standard for enough money, enough stuff, enough success, your brain will automatically borrow a standard from your social environment. This is not weakness. It is how human beings have always evaluated relative status, and it was a useful survival mechanism for most of human history. The problem is that your social environment in a modern economy is no longer your village of 150 people. It is every heavily curated, financially aspirational image produced by 7 billion humans on a global platform. You are comparing your ordinary Tuesday to everyone else's best Friday, and then wondering why you feel like you need to spend more to feel like enough. The unsexy habit is this. Write down, in specific and concrete language, what your genuinely good financial life looks like. Not your fantasy life, not the life you think you should want. The specific number in your savings account that would make you feel secure. The specific home environment that would feel like home without qualifying it. The specific experiences you would actually spend money on if other people's opinions were not a variable. This document does not have to be long. It can be one paragraph, but it should be specific enough that you could look at your bank account on any given month and know clearly whether you are moving toward that life or away from it. Research from Tim Kasser at Knox College found that individuals who had clearly articulated intrinsic financial goals, goals tied to personal security and genuine experience, reported both higher financial satisfaction and lower anxiety around money than individuals with extrinsic goals tied to social comparison, even when controlling for income. The clarity of the goal mattered more than the size of the bank account. What happens to you without this rule is that you're playing a game with no finish line, and the only available signal for whether you are winning is whether you have more than the people around you, which is a race that cannot be won and has been trying to bankrupt people since money was invented. This brings us to what you actually do with all of this starting tomorrow. This week, you open your bank account right now, not later this week, not when you feel ready, and you set up one automatic transfer that moves a specific dollar amount to a savings account on the same day your next paycheck arrives. Start small enough that it does not feel frightening. Even $25 or $50 per pay period is not the point. The point is creating the system, because systems compound in ways that one-time decisions never do. The behavior you are building this week is the infrastructure that everything else runs on, and getting it started now costs you less than 10 minutes and changes the financial trajectory of your entire year. This month, you spend 30 minutes, one single uninterrupted session, creating a zero-based budget for the upcoming month before that month begins. You assign every expected dollar a specific category, you set a number for dining out that you are genuinely comfortable with rather than one that feels like punishment, and you write down your net worth for the first time so you have a baseline to measure against. The act of writing the number, even if you don't love the number, activates a completely different relationship with your money because it transforms financial reality into a vague anxiety into a specific fact, and specific facts are things you can work with. This quarter, you do the subscription audit. You go line by line through every recurring charge on every account. You apply the honest, would I pay for this today question, and you cancel every subscription that does not survive that question. Then you build in the batch cooking habit, not as a diet or a lifestyle overhaul, just as a simple rule that at least twice a week, whatever you cook produces more than one meal's worth of food, so that future you always has something to come home to. And you commit to the 24-hour waiting room for every unplanned purchase above your chosen threshold. These 3 changes, implemented together over 1 quarter, will recover more money than most people manage to save in an entire year of trying to cut spending through willpower alone. This year, you define your enough in writing in specific language with real numbers attached to it before the end of this quarter, and you revisit and update that document every time you do your monthly net worth calculation. What you are doing over this year is not just building better financial habits, you're building a completely different relationship with money, one where your decisions are made from clarity and intention rather than from anxiety and social comparison. By the end of 12 months of these habits compounded together, you will not just have more money, you will have a financial system that runs largely without requiring you to fight yourself every day to maintain it. Remember the scene at the beginning? You standing in a store, hand already on your wallet, reaching for something you didn't even really want? Now you understand what was actually happening in that moment. You were not being impulsive. You were responding to a system that had been quietly calibrated over years of small, unconsidered decisions to make spending feel like the default and saving feel like an effort. You were not the problem. The system you had built around you was the problem. Here's the truth about where you go from here, and it comes down to 2 paths that diverge from this exact moment. The first path is the virtuous cycle. You automate one small savings transfer, which means you stop depending on willpower, which means you actually start accumulating money, which means your net worth number starts moving, which makes the habit feel rewarding instead of punishing, which makes you more motivated to add the next habit, which makes the whole system easier to maintain, which means your financial life slowly and steadily starts to look like something you chose rather than something that happened to you. The second path is the destructive cycle. You recognize the value of everything you just heard, you mean to start, life gets busy, the automatic transfer never gets set up, the budget never gets written, the subscriptions keep quietly charging, and 1 year from now, you're in the exact same position, or slightly worse, because lifestyle creep continued and compounding didn't. You're already at the fork. The only real question is which path you take from this moment. Here's the research that makes this more than just a motivational framing. A 2023 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research tracked 10,000 adults over a decade and found that the single most consistent predictor of financial well-being in middle age was not income, not education, and not investment returns. It was the presence of automatic, habituated financial behaviors that were established before the age of 40 and required minimal ongoing willpower to maintain. The habits were not glamorous, they were not complicated, they were almost embarrassingly ordinary. They just happened to be the ones that worked. So here's the question I want to leave you with. And it's not a financial question, it's a more fundamental one. If the life you actually want is not built on the most exciting choices, but on the most consistent ones, what's stopping you from choosing to be boring on purpose?